The morning sun streamed through the large windows of Sunshine Café, casting warm golden light across the polished wooden tables. Martha Stevens sat alone at her usual corner table, sipping her latte and scrolling through her phone. At 52, Martha had lived her entire life in this small town, never venturing far from the beliefs and attitudes she'd inherited from her parents. Her graying blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, her lips pressed into a thin line that rarely softened into a smile. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully as new customers entered the cafe. Martha glanced up, her gaze immediately falling on a tall, distinguished elderly black man and a young girl who appeared to be his granddaughter. The man wore a neatly pressed button-up shirt and carried himself with quiet dignity. The girl, about 12 years old with beads adorning the ends of her braids, held his hand and chatted animatedly about a book she was reading for school. And then, "Grandpa, the main character has to decide whether to follow the rules or do what's right. It's really making me think," the girl said, her voice bright with enthusiasm. "That's what good books do, Zora," her grandfather replied with a warm smile. "They make us question the world around us." Martha's expression soured as she watched them approach the counter. She'd grown up in a time and place where people kept to their own kind, as her father used to say. Though the town had changed over the decades, Martha's views remained firmly rooted in the past. The cafe was unusually crowded that morning. As Zora and her grandfather navigated the narrow path between tables, the girl tried to squeeze past a chair that had been pulled out into the walkway. Despite her careful movements, her backpack brushed against Martha's table, causing a small splash of coffee to spill onto the saucer. "Excuse me," Zora said politely, turning to make sure she hadn't caused any damage. Martha's reaction was immediate and disproportionate. "Watch where you're going," she snapped, her voice rising above the gentle hum of cafe conversation. "Can't you control your child?" She directed this at the grandfather, deliberately loud enough for nearby tables to hear. The cafe grew quieter. A few heads turned. "I'm very sorry about that," Dr. James Wilson said calmly, placing a protective hand on his granddaughter's shoulder. "No harm done, I hope." "There's plenty of harm done," Martha continued, her voice taking on an ugly edge. "This place used to be a nice, quiet spot before it started letting just anyone in." Her emphasis on anyone made her meaning painfully clear. Zora's bright expression fell, her young face registering confusion that quickly transformed into hurt. She wasn't a stranger to prejudice even at her young age, but the public nature of this encounter made it particularly painful. Dr. Wilson's face remained composed, though a subtle tightening around his eyes betrayed his feelings. He'd lived through far worse in his 70 years, through segregated schools and hospitals, through being the only black medical student in his class, through patients who'd requested a different doctor when they saw his face. He'd learned long ago that responding with anger only reinforced the stereotypes people like Martha clung to. "Let's find a seat, Zora," he said gently to his granddaughter. "I believe there's a table by the window." A barista behind the counter who had witnessed the exchange approached Martha's table. "Ma'am, is everything all right over here?" she asked, her tone professional but cool. "It is now," Martha said with a dismissive wave. "Just make sure people watch where they're going." From across the cafe, Dr. Wilson settled into a chair across from his granddaughter. He could see her fighting back tears and leaned forward. "Remember what we talked about, Zora? About how some people carry heavy things in their hearts?" Zora nodded, blinking rapidly. "I know, Grandpa. But why does she have to be so mean?" "That meanness comes from fear and ignorance," he explained quietly. "And it hurts her more than it hurts us in the long run." At a nearby table, Tom and Lisa Chen exchanged glances. They were regular customers who recognized Dr. Wilson from the local hospital where he worked. Tom, a nurse in the cardiac unit, had often spoken of Dr. Wilson's skill and compassion. He stood up and walked over to their table. "Dr. Wilson, good morning," he said warmly. "Great to see you outside the hospital. And who's this young lady?" The tension in Zora's shoulders eased slightly as her grandfather introduced her. "This is my granddaughter, Zora. She's staying with me for the week while her parents are at a conference. Zora, this is Tom Chen, one of the finest nurses I've had the pleasure to work with." Martha observed this interaction from her corner, noting how easily others spoke to the man and child she had just humiliated. For a brief moment, a flicker of something like doubt crossed her face, but she quickly suppressed it. returning her attention to her phone. The cafe gradually returned to its normal rhythm of conversation and clinking cups. Zora, resilient as children often are, soon became absorbed in telling her grandfather about her upcoming science project. Dr. Wilson listened attentively, occasionally offering suggestions or asking questions that made her think more deeply about her approach. Martha finished her coffee and gathered her things. As she stood to leave, she overheard a fragment of conversation from another table. "That's Dr. Wilson, the cardiologist. He saved my uncle's life last year." She hesitated for the briefest moment, then continued toward the door. As she passed the grandfather and granddaughter, she kept her eyes straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge them. Yet she couldn't help noticing how the child's laughter had returned, how her eyes shone with intelligence and curiosity, as she explained something to her grandfather using animated hand gestures. Outside, Martha paused on the sidewalk, an unexpected and unwelcome thought intruding. What if someone spoke to her own grandchildren that way? The thought hovered, unwanted, before she pushed it away, continuing down the street toward her car. Back in the cafe, Dr. Wilson checked his watch. "We should head out soon. I promised to show you my laboratory at the hospital, remember?" Zora's face lit up. "Will I get to see the heart models you use for teaching?" "Absolutely," he assured her. "And maybe we'll run into some of my students. They always have great questions, just like you." As they gathered their things to leave, the barista approached with 2 to-go cups. "Your usual Earl Grey, Dr. Wilson, and hot chocolate for your granddaughter. On the house today." "That's very kind, but not necessary," Dr. Wilson began. The barista smiled. "We appreciate all our customers, especially the ones who bring such bright young minds into our cafe. Hope to see you both again soon." Zora accepted her hot chocolate with a shy, "Thank you." Her earlier hurt gradually healing under the simple kindness of strangers who saw her worth. Little did either of them know that their paths would cross again with Martha's, in circumstances none of them could predict, and that today's ugly encounter would be the beginning of a story that would change all their lives. The walk back to Dr. Wilson's house was quieter than usual. Zora kicked at pebbles on the sidewalk, her earlier excitement about the science project dimmed by the encounter at the cafe. Dr. Wilson gave his granddaughter space with her thoughts, knowing from experience that sometimes silence was the most respectful response to hurt. When they reached the charming 2-story house with its wraparound porch and carefully tended garden, Zora finally spoke up. "Grandpa, why was that lady so mean to us? We didn't do anything wrong." Dr. Wilson settled into the porch swing and patted the space beside him. Zora joined him, her small frame fitting perfectly in the crook of his arm as he set the swing into a gentle motion. "You're right, Zora. We didn't do anything wrong," he began, choosing his words carefully. "Some people carry ideas in their heads about others based on how they look. These ideas get passed down like bad recipes from parents to children for generations. They're not based on truth or personal experience, they're based on fear." "But what is she afraid of?" "We're not scary," Zora said, confusion clear in her voice. Dr. Wilson smiled gently. "No, we're not. But change can be scary for some folks. When I was about your age, there were people who thought someone like me could never become a doctor. They were afraid of a world where their assumptions were proven wrong." "That's silly," Zora declared with the straightforward logic of youth. "It is," he agreed. "But when people hold these beliefs for a long time, being proven wrong threatens how they see themselves in the world. It's easier to be unkind to us than to question everything they've believed." Zora thought about this, her brow furrowing. "So it's not really about us at all?" "That's exactly right," Dr. Wilson said, pride warming his voice. "Their behavior tells us about them, not about us. That's important to remember." Inside the house, they moved to the kitchen where Dr. Wilson began preparing lunch. Zora set the table, still processing their conversation. "Did people treat you badly when you were becoming a doctor?" she asked suddenly. Dr. Wilson paused, a tomato in one hand and a knife in the other. He'd shared some stories with Zora before, but had always been careful not to burden her with the worst of what he'd experienced. "Yes, sometimes they did," he said honestly. "When I started medical school in 1972, I was the only black student in my class. Some professors didn't expect me to succeed. Some patients didn't want me to treat them." "What did you do?" Zora asked wide-eyed. "I kept showing up. I studied harder than anyone else. I found people who believed in me, like your grandmother." She typed all my medical school papers and quizzed me before exams even while she was working 2 jobs. His voice softened at the mention of his late wife. And I remembered why I wanted to be a doctor in the first place. To help people, all people, regardless of how they might feel about me. As they ate lunch, Dr. Wilson shared more stories, not just the difficult ones, but also tales of triumph and unexpected kindness. He told Zora about his first surgery, about the mentor who defended him against a biased supervisor, about the day he was appointed head of cardiology. Your grandmother and I danced around this very kitchen when I got that phone call, he recalled, smiling at the memory. She always said, James, your heart is so big it makes sense you'd end up fixing other people's. Zora giggled at this, the sound like music in the sunlit kitchen. I think I want to be a doctor too, she said. Or maybe a scientist. I'm not sure yet. You've got plenty of time to decide, Dr. Wilson assured her. And whatever you choose, I know you'll approach it with that wonderful, curious mind of yours. After lunch, they prepared for their trip to the hospital. Dr. Wilson had promised to show Zora his laboratory, where he still conducted research despite being semi-retired from surgery. As they walked through the neighborhood, he pointed out flowers and trees, naming each one and sometimes sharing medicinal properties. Knowledge passed down from his own grandmother, who had been known as a healer in her small southern community. Knowledge comes in many forms, he told Zora. Some of it from books, some from experience, some passed down through generations, all of it valuable. As they approached the bus stop, Dr. Wilson spotted a familiar figure coming out of the pharmacy across the street. Martha Stevens, the woman from the cafe. She was checking something on her receipt, her face pinched with annoyance. Dr. Wilson instinctively placed a gentle hand on Zora's shoulder, ready to steer her away if necessary. But Martha hadn't noticed them yet. Just then, Martha looked up and froze momentarily when she saw them. Her expression cycled through surprise, discomfort, and something that might have been shame before settling into deliberate indifference. She turned and walked quickly in the opposite direction. That's her, isn't it? The cafe lady, Zora said quietly. Yes, it is, Dr. Wilson acknowledged. Remember what we talked about? Her behavior tells us about her, not about us, Zora recited. Exactly right. The bus arrived and they climbed aboard. Now let me tell you about the research we're doing at the lab. We're studying how certain proteins affect heart tissue after a heart attack. The hospital was busy when they arrived, but many staff members greeted Dr. Wilson warmly as he led Zora through the corridors. Nurses, doctors, janitors, administrators, people from all walks of life stopped to chat briefly or simply smiled in recognition. Dr. Wilson, is this your granddaughter you've been telling us about? Called a young doctor, hurrying over. Hi there, I'm Dr. Patel. Your grandfather mentored me during my residency, and let me tell you, you couldn't ask for a better teacher. Zora beamed with pride, standing a little taller. As they continued through the hospital, she noticed how many people seemed to genuinely respect and like her grandfather. It was a stark contrast to the treatment they'd received at the cafe. In the laboratory, Dr. Wilson showed Zora the specialized equipment used in cardiovascular research. He let her peer into microscopes at tissue samples and explained his current research project in terms she could understand. His colleagues welcomed her questions, treating her with the same respect they showed each other. This is where the magic happens, Dr. Wilson told her, gesturing around the lab. Not the kind in storybooks, but the real kind, where curiosity and persistence lead to discoveries that save lives. Later, as Dr. Wilson was showing Zora the educational models used to teach medical students about heart conditions, his pager beeped. He checked it with a slight frown. Everything okay, Grandpa? Zora asked. Yes, dear. Just a consultation request from the emergency department. It shouldn't take long. He turned to his research assistant, who had been helping with the tour. Alex, would you mind continuing to show Zora around? I'll be back shortly. No problem, Dr. Wilson. We were just getting to the 3D printed heart models anyway, which are pretty cool, Alex said with a smile. I won't be long, Dr. Wilson promised Zora. And afterward, maybe we can stop by the cafeteria for ice cream before heading home. As he headed toward the emergency department, Dr. Wilson mentally shifted into his clinical mindset, unaware that the consultation would bring him face to face with the woman whose unkind words still lingered in his granddaughter's mind. The path of their lives was about to intersect again, in a way that would challenge Martha's deepest beliefs and open the possibility of profound change. Back in the laboratory, Zora held a model of a human heart in her hands, marveling at its complexity, while Alex explained how each valve worked. Outside the hospital windows, storm clouds gathered, foreshadowing the crisis that was about to unfold in the emergency department just 2 floors below them. The downtown shopping district was busy with weekend shoppers when Martha Stevens felt the first twinge of discomfort. She dismissed it as indigestion from the greasy lunch she'd eaten earlier and continued browsing through a clearance rack. The persistent pain beneath her breastbone was easy enough to ignore at first, a dull ache that came and went. But as she moved to the next store, the discomfort intensified, spreading across her chest and radiating into her left arm. Probably just stress, she muttered to herself, pausing to lean against a store window. The cool glass felt good against her forehead, which was now beaded with sweat despite the air-conditioned shop. Her reflection showed a pale face, lips slightly blue around the edges. For the first time, Martha felt a flutter of real fear. A young shop assistant approached her. "Ma'am, are you all right? You don't look well." Martha tried to straighten up and nod, but a wave of dizziness washed over her. "I just need to sit down for a minute," she managed to say, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. "I think you need more than that," the assistant said firmly, guiding Martha to a chair and calling out to her manager. "We should call an ambulance." "Don't be ridiculous," Martha protested weakly, even as the pain crescendoed to an unbearable level. "I don't need—" She couldn't finish the sentence as a crushing pressure enveloped her chest, stealing her breath and sending panic coursing through her body. This was more than indigestion or stress. Something was terribly wrong. The next few minutes passed in a blur. Someone called 911. A woman who identified herself as a nurse happened to be shopping nearby and stayed with Martha, checking her pulse and speaking in calm, reassuring tones. The world narrowed to the excruciating pain and the struggle to breathe. When the paramedics arrived, their efficient movements and rapid-fire questions barely registered. Martha felt herself being lifted onto a stretcher, heard fragments of medical terminology exchanged above her. Possible cardiac event, blood pressure dropping. "Need to move quickly?" The ambulance siren wailed as they sped through traffic toward County General Hospital. Martha drifted in and out of awareness, the pain occasionally receding only to return with greater intensity. One of the paramedics held her hand and spoke encouragingly, but fear had its grip on Martha now. Fear not just of the pain, but of dying alone. Her husband had passed 5 years ago, and her children lived in different states. There would be no one waiting anxiously in the hospital lobby for news of her condition. The emergency department doors slid open as the paramedics wheeled her in, calling out vital signs to the waiting medical team. Martha was transferred to a hospital gurney and rushed into a treatment room where nurses attached monitors to her chest and inserted an IV into her arm. A doctor in blue scrubs approached, asking questions that Martha struggled to answer through waves of pain. "Mrs. Stevens, I'm Dr. Reyes. We're going to take care of you. Can you tell me when the pain started?" Martha tried to focus. "This afternoon, shopping. It just hit me." The room seemed to spin around her. Machines beeped with increasing urgency. Through the haze of pain, Martha heard Dr. Reyes speak into a phone. "We need the cardiac team stat. Possible aortic dissection." "Yes, I know he's with his granddaughter today, but we need him specifically." "Thank you." Time became meaningless as Martha fought to stay conscious. The medical team moved with controlled urgency around her, their voices a backdrop to her fear. She heard someone say they needed to prepare her for emergency surgery, that her heart was in danger. "Am I going to die?" she whispered to a nurse who was adjusting her IV. "We're doing everything we can," the nurse assured her, "and we've called in our best cardiac specialist. He'll be here any minute." Martha closed her eyes, memories flashing through her mind, her children's birthdays, her wedding day, ordinary moments that now seemed precious. She thought of her grandchildren, and felt a stab of regret for all the times she'd been too busy or too preoccupied to fully engage with them. If she survived this, she promised herself, things would be different. The treatment room door opened, and Martha heard Dr. Reyes's relieved voice. "Thank you for coming so quickly, Dr. Wilson." Martha's eyes flew open at the name, struggling to focus on the new arrival. Even through her pain-clouded vision, she recognized him immediately. the elderly black man from the cafe, the one she had humiliated in front of his granddaughter. He wore a white coat now, a stethoscope around his neck, his expression one of professional concern as he reviewed the chart Dr. Reyes handed him. Aortic dissection? Dr. Wilson asked, moving to Martha's bedside. That's our working diagnosis. The CT scan results are just coming in, Dr. Reyes replied. Dr. Wilson leaned over Martha, his eyes meeting hers. A flicker of recognition crossed his face, but his professional demeanor never wavered. Mrs. Stevens, I'm Dr. James Wilson, Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery. I understand you're experiencing severe chest pain. I'm going to examine you now if that's all right. Martha couldn't speak, caught between physical agony and the shock of finding herself at the mercy of a man she had treated with such contempt. She managed a small nod, watching as he placed his stethoscope on her chest with gentle, practiced movements. Dr. Wilson listened intently, then examined the monitors displaying her vital signs. When the CT scan results appeared on a screen, he studied them with focused attention. His voice when he spoke was calm but carried unmistakable urgency. It is an aortic dissection, type A. We need to get her to surgery immediately. He turned to Martha, explaining in clear, simple terms. Mrs. Stevens, the main artery carrying blood from your heart has a tear in it. This is life-threatening but treatable with emergency surgery. Do I have your consent to operate? Martha looked into the face of the man she had dismissed with such casual cruelty just days before. Now, he was likely the only person who could save her life. The irony was not lost on her, even through her pain and fear. Yes, she whispered. Please, help me. Dr. Wilson nodded and immediately began giving instructions to the team. Prep or two, I'll scrub in right away. Page Dr. Nguyen for anesthesia, and have the cardiac team standing by. We need to move quickly. As the team prepared Martha for surgery, Dr. Wilson stepped out of the room briefly. In the hallway, he found Zora waiting with his research assistant, concern evident on their faces. Is everything okay, Grandpa? Zora asked. Alex said you had an emergency. Dr. Wilson knelt to meet his granddaughter at eye level. I have to perform an emergency surgery, Zora. Someone is very sick and needs my help right away. Is it the lady from the cafe? Zora asked perceptively, having glimpsed Martha through the partially open door. Dr. Wilson hesitated, then nodded. Yes, it is, and right now she needs a doctor more than anything else. Zora considered this for a moment, then asked, Are you going to help her, even after she was mean to us? Especially because she was mean to us, Dr. Wilson said gently. Being a doctor means helping everyone who needs it, regardless of who they are or what they've done. That's the oath I took, understanding dawned in Zora's eyes, like you were telling me earlier, about showing up and doing your best no matter what. Exactly, Dr. Wilson smiled, feeling a surge of pride in his granddaughter's wisdom. Alex will take you to the doctor's lounge where you can wait. There are books there, and I've asked one of the nurses to check on you. This might take a few hours. I'll be fine, Grandpa, Zora assured him. Go save her. With a quick kiss on Zora's forehead, Dr. Wilson hurried to prepare for surgery. As he scrubbed his hands methodically, his mind focused entirely on the procedure ahead, the delicate repair of Martha's aorta that would require all his skill and experience. Any personal feelings about the patient had no place in his operating room. There was only the sacred task before him, to heal, to save a life hanging in the balance. Martha, meanwhile, was wheeled toward the operating room, drifting between consciousness and darkness. As the anesthesia began to take effect, her last coherent thought was of the kind, dignified face of Dr. Wilson, promising to help her despite everything. Then darkness claimed her, and she knew nothing more of the desperate battle for her life that was about to begin. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the first sound Martha heard as consciousness slowly returned. Her eyelids felt impossibly heavy, her mouth dry as cotton. The sharp smell of antiseptic filled her nostrils. For several confusing moments, she couldn't remember where she was or what had happened. Mrs. Stevens, can you hear me? A gentle voice broke through the fog. If you can hear me, try to squeeze my hand. Martha felt warm fingers wrapped around her own and managed a weak squeeze. Gradually, she forced her eyes open, blinking against the bright hospital lights. A nurse with kind eyes came into focus. Welcome back, the nurse said, adjusting something on an IV drip. You're in the recovery room at County General. You've had surgery. Memory returned in fragments, the searing pain in her chest, the frantic ride in the ambulance, and then Martha's breath caught as she remembered Dr. Wilson's face above her, recognizing her even as he prepared to save her life. The surgery? She managed to rasp. It was successful, the nurse assured her. Dr. Wilson repaired the tear in your aorta. It was touch and go for a while. You gave us quite a scare, but you're stable now. You'll need to rest and recover, but the prognosis is good. Martha closed her eyes again, overwhelmed by the knowledge that she was alive, because of the very man she had treated with such contempt. The irony was almost too much to bear. Dr. Wilson stayed with you through the night, the nurse continued, checking Martha's vital signs. 12 hours of surgery and he never took a break. That man is something else. 12 hours? Martha whispered, shocked. The nurse nodded. It was a complex repair. Most surgeons would have called in a replacement halfway through, but not Dr. Wilson. My patient, my responsibility. That's what he always says. Been saying it for 40 years, according to the older nurses. Martha turned her face away, shame washing over her. She had judged him based solely on his skin color, had spoken to him as if he were beneath her, and now she owed him her life. The weight of that realization pressed on her chest more heavily than any physical pain. Over the next 2 days, Martha drifted in and out of sleep, gradually growing stronger. Various doctors and nurses checked on her, explaining the details of her condition and the long recovery ahead. Dr. Wilson himself came by briefly, his manner professional and kind as he examined her and reviewed her progress. Your body responded well to the surgery, he told her, making notes in her chart. The repair is holding nicely, and your vitals are improving steadily. You're not out of the woods yet, but I'm pleased with your progress. Martha struggled to meet his eyes. Thank you, she said, the words feeling woefully inadequate. For everything, Dr. Wilson gave a small nod. No thanks necessary, Mrs. Stevens, it's what I do. He paused, then added, You should rest now. Your body has been through a significant trauma. After he left, Martha lay awake for a long time, thinking about the gulf between the man she had assumed Dr. Wilson to be and the reality of who he actually was. The prejudices she had carried all her life suddenly seemed not just wrong, but absurd in the face of his skill and dedication. On the 3rd day after her surgery, Martha was moved from intensive care to a regular recovery room. As a nurse helped her settle in, Martha noticed a small group of children in the hallway pushing a cart of books from room to room. With a jolt of recognition, she spotted Dr. Wilson's granddaughter among them. What's that? Martha asked the nurse, nodding toward the children. Oh, that's the Book Buddies program, the nurse explained. Kids from the community volunteer to bring books to patients and sometimes read to those who can't read themselves. It helps with recovery, takes the mind off things. Before Martha could respond, the cart stopped outside her door and Zora peered in. Recognition flickered across the girl's face, followed by hesitation. You can come in, Martha said, her voice still weak but clearer than it had been. Zora entered cautiously, followed by an adult volunteer who supervised the program. Hi, Zora said, her voice small. We have books if you'd like something to read. Martha looked at the child, remembering the hurt in her eyes that day at the cafe. Yet here she was, offering books to the very woman who had caused that hurt. I would like that, Martha said softly. What do you recommend? Zora considered the question seriously, then pulled a book from the cart. This one's about a woman who climbs mountains. My grandpa says stories about people overcoming challenges can help patients feel stronger. Martha accepted the book, noting the title Peak, Finding Strength in the Steepest Climbs. The metaphor wasn't lost on her. Your grandpa seems very wise, she said carefully. He is, Zora agreed, her voice gaining confidence. He's the smartest person I know. And the kindest. I believe that now, Martha admitted. He saved my life, Zora nodded. That's what he does. He says everyone deserves help when they're hurting. The adult volunteer checked her watch. Zora, we should move on to the next room. Other patients are waiting. Okay, Zora agreed. To Martha, she added, I hope you like the book. And I hope you feel better soon. As they turned to leave, Martha called out, Zora? The girl looked back. Thank you. Not just for the book. Zora seemed to understand what Martha couldn't fully express. She gave a small smile and continued with her volunteer work. Later that afternoon, Dr. Wilson came to check on Martha again. This time, she was prepared. Your granddaughter brought me a book, she said, after he had completed his examination. She's very special. Yes, she is, Dr. Wilson agreed, pride evident in his voice. Martha took a deep breath. Dr. Wilson, I need to apologize. The way I spoke to you and your granddaughter at the cafe was inexcusable. I was raised with certain beliefs that I never questioned. That's not an excuse, just a fact. Dr. Wilson listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful. And then you saved my life. Martha continued, her voice breaking slightly. You spent 12 hours in surgery for someone who treated you with contempt. I don't understand how you could do that. Dr. Wilson sat down in the chair beside her bed, taking time to consider his response. Mrs. Stevens, when I became a doctor, I took an oath to treat all patients to the best of my ability, regardless of who they are. That's not just professional ethics, it's my personal belief as well. He paused, then continued. I've encountered prejudice throughout my career. If I had let that stop me, I wouldn't have become chief of surgery, wouldn't have developed the technique that saved your life, wouldn't have trained hundreds of young doctors who are out there saving lives today. Martha listened, humbled by his words. The surgery I performed on you, Dr. Wilson explained, is one I helped pioneer 20 years ago. Before that, the survival rate for type A aortic dissections was significantly lower. Every patient who lives because of that technique is a victory, not just for me, but for everyone who believed in me when others didn't. Tears welled in Martha's eyes. I've been so wrong, she whispered, about so many things. Dr. Wilson's expression softened. Mrs. Stevens, it's never too late to see people differently. The human heart is remarkable. And I don't just mean physically. It can heal, it can grow, it can change. I've seen it countless times in my patients. He stood, checking his watch. I need to make my rounds, but I'll check on you again tomorrow. In the meantime, I hear my granddaughter gave you an excellent book recommendation. As Dr. Wilson left, Martha picked up the book Zora had chosen. She opened to the first page and began to read, understanding that her recovery would involve more than just her physical heart. Something deeper was healing too, something that had been damaged long before her aorta began to tear. That evening, as sunset painted the hospital room in warm golden hues, a nurse brought in Martha's dinner tray. You had a visitor earlier, but you were asleep, she mentioned. Left you something. She handed Martha a small handmade card. On the front was a carefully drawn heart, not the Valentine shape, but an anatomically correct heart, clearly inspired by the models in Dr. Wilson's laboratory. Inside, in a child's careful handwriting, were the words, Hearts can heal. Get well soon. Zora. Martha held the card gently, as if it were made of glass. The journey ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time, she felt a fragile hope that perhaps she too could change, that the tear in her worldview, like the tear in her aorta, could be repaired by skilled and compassionate hands. 6 weeks after her surgery, Martha Stevens sat nervously in the waiting room of Dr. Wilson's office. Her physical recovery had progressed well, but today wasn't about her heart, at least not the physical one. She had requested this appointment specifically to speak with Dr. Wilson, not as his patient, but as someone seeking a different kind of healing. The office was warm and inviting, with framed diplomas lining one wall, evidence of Dr. Wilson's impressive career, alongside photos of what appeared to be generations of family. Martha noticed a recent addition, a child's drawing of a heart signed by Zora with the words, My grandpa fixes hearts, written underneath. Mrs. Stevens, Dr. Wilson's secretary called. Dr. Wilson will see you now. Martha rose, smoothing her sweater with slightly trembling hands. The walk to Dr. Wilson's private office felt longer than it actually was, each step carrying the weight of her purpose today. Dr. Wilson stood as she entered, gesturing to a comfortable chair across from his desk. Mrs. Stevens, good to see you. Your most recent test results look excellent. The surgical site is healing nicely. Thank you, Martha said, settling into the chair. But that's not why I asked to see you today. Dr. Wilson nodded, sensing the shift in her tone. I thought that might be the case. How can I help you? Martha took a deep breath. I've done a lot of thinking during my recovery about the kind of person I've been, the beliefs I've held, and the hurt I've caused. She met his eyes directly. I want to apologize properly, to you and to Zora, for how I behaved at the cafe that day. There's no excuse for it. I appreciate that, Dr. Wilson said quietly. It's more than just an apology, Martha continued. I don't know how to explain this without sounding dramatic, but nearly dying changes a person. And so does being saved by someone you treated badly. Her voice grew steadier as she spoke. The prejudices I've carried all my life suddenly seem so small, so meaningless compared to what really matters. Dr. Wilson listened attentively, his expression thoughtful. I don't expect forgiveness, Martha added quickly. That's not why I'm here. I just wanted you to know that what you did, not just the surgery, but how you treated me with dignity despite everything, it changed something in me. And I'm trying to change too. Dr. Wilson leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Stevens, may I share something with you? In 45 years of medicine, I've learned that people are capable of remarkable transformation when confronted with their own mortality. It's one of the privileges of my profession, witnessing that change. He picked up a framed photo from his desk, a black and white image of an elderly black woman with a dignified bearing similar to his own. This is my grandmother. She was born in 1901 in Mississippi. She wasn't allowed to attend school past the 6th grade, wasn't allowed to vote for most of her life, had to use separate facilities. Yet she never lost her belief in people's capacity to grow. He set the photo down gently. She used to tell me, James, hatred is a heavy thing to carry. Some folks carry it their whole lives without ever setting it down, never realizing how it's breaking their own backs. I've found that to be true. Martha nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I feel lighter, she admitted. Even saying these things to you, it feels like putting down something I've been carrying a long time. That's a good start, Dr. Wilson said kindly. The heart is a remarkable organ, in all its meanings. It can sustain damage and still heal, still grow stronger if given the chance. Martha wiped her eyes. I'd like to do something. To make amends, I suppose. Not just words, but action. I don't know what, but something meaningful. Dr. Wilson considered this. As it happens, there is something you might consider. The hospital runs a community outreach program, bringing preventive healthcare education to underserved neighborhoods. We always need volunteers. I don't have medical training, Martha said uncertainly. That's not necessary. We need people to help with logistics, to welcome community members, to distribute materials. Sometimes the most important thing is just showing up, being present, listening to people's concerns. He added with a gentle smile. If you're serious about change, Mrs. Stevens, there's no better way than to step into spaces different from your own, to meet people where they are. I'd like that, Martha said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. As they discussed the details of the program, there was a light knock at the office door. Dr. Wilson looked at his watch. That would be my granddaughter, he explained. She joins me for lunch on Thursdays when she doesn't have school. Martha tensed slightly. I should go. Actually, Dr. Wilson said. Would you like to say hello? If you're comfortable with that. After a moment's hesitation, Martha nodded. Yes, I would. Dr. Wilson called for Zora to come in. The girl entered, her backpack slung over one shoulder. She stopped short when she saw Martha, recognition and surprise crossing her face. Zora, you remember Mrs. Stevens, Dr. Wilson said gently. Yes, Zora said, her voice neither warm nor cold. From the cafe and the hospital. Hello, Zora, Martha said softly. I wanted to thank you for the book you brought me and for the card. It meant a lot. Zora glanced at her grandfather, who gave her an encouraging nod. You're welcome, she said. Are you feeling better? Much better, Martha said. Your grandfather is an amazing doctor. I know, Zora said, a hint of pride entering her voice. He helps lots of people. An awkward silence fell. Martha gathered her courage. Zora, I also wanted to apologize for how I spoke to you that day at the cafe. It was wrong and unkind, and you didn't deserve it. I'm very sorry. Zora studied Martha's face with the direct gaze of a child seemingly searching for sincerity. After a moment, she said simply, "Thank you for saying that." Dr. Wilson placed a gentle hand on his granddaughter's shoulder. "Mrs. Stevens is going to start volunteering with our community outreach program." "Really?" Zora's expression brightened with interest. "I help with that too sometimes. I give out the stickers and healthy snacks to the kids. Maybe we'll see each other there then," Martha said with a tentative smile. Zora nodded, then turned to her grandfather. "Can we go to the cafeteria now? I'm starving, and they have mac and cheese today." Dr. Wilson chuckled. "Of course, Mrs. Stevens and I were just finishing up." Martha stood gathering her purse. "Thank you for seeing me, Dr. Wilson, and for everything." "You're very welcome," he said, extending his hand. She shook it, feeling the strength in his grasp, the same hands that had repaired her heart working inside her chest. As Martha turned to leave, Zora spoke up. "Mrs. Stevens?" Martha looked back. "I'm glad you're feeling better." The simple kindness in those words brought a fresh wave of emotion. "Thank you, Zora. That means a lot." 3 months later, the community center was bustling with activity as families arrived for the monthly health fair. Tables were set up around the large room, each focused on a different aspect of preventive health care. Nutrition, exercise, blood pressure screening, diabetes prevention, and more. Martha stood at the welcome table, checking in families and directing them to the appropriate stations. She wore a volunteer badge and a genuine smile as she handed out program materials. The work had become an important part of her life, a concrete way to put her changed perspective into action. Across the room, she spotted Zora enthusiastically explaining a model of a healthy lunch plate to a group of children her age. Dr. Wilson stood nearby, demonstrating proper hand-washing techniques to another group. In the months since her surgery, Martha had made other changes too. She'd reconnected with her son, who had distanced himself years ago due to her attitudes. She'd started attending community events she would have avoided before. She'd even invited her neighbors, a young couple from India, over for dinner, something the old Martha would never have considered. None of it erased her past behavior or magically eliminated the prejudices she had harbored for decades. Change came slowly, with stumbles along the way. Sometimes she caught herself falling into old thought patterns and had to consciously redirect. But the effort felt worthwhile in a way few things in her life ever had. As the event wound down, Dr. Wilson approached Martha's table. "We had a great turnout today," he observed, helping her organize the remaining materials. "It was wonderful," Martha agreed. "I think we reached a lot of families." "You've become quite an asset to the program," he said. "The coordinator tells me you've been here every week." Martha nodded. "It gives me purpose and perspective." She hesitated, then added, "My son and his family are coming to visit next month. First time in years. I'm nervous but hopeful." "That's good news," Dr. Wilson said warmly. "Family connections are precious." Zora bounded up to them, her energy seemingly undiminished after the long day. "Grandpa, can we get ice cream before we go home? I gave out all my stickers and information sheets." "I think you've earned it." Dr. Wilson smiled, then turned to Martha. "Would you like to join us? There's a great shop just around the corner." The invitation caught Martha by surprise. This wasn't the polite distance of doctor and patient, or even the formal collaboration of fellow volunteers. This was something closer to friendship, a bridge she hadn't expected to be offered so soon, if ever. "I'd like that very much," she said sincerely. As they walked together toward the ice cream shop, Zora skipping slightly ahead, Martha reflected on the strange and unexpected journey that had brought her here. A chance encounter, a moment of cruelty, a life-threatening crisis, and now this tentative new beginning. "Something on your mind?" Dr. Wilson asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "I was just thinking about hearts," Martha said. "The physical ones you repair and the other kind, the ones that need different healing." Dr. Wilson nodded in understanding. "Both are essential work." "Thank you for showing me that," Martha said quietly. "For giving me the chance to change." "You did the hardest part yourself," he replied. "You chose to change. Many people never do." Ahead of them, Zora called out excitedly about the ice cream flavors visible through the shop window. Dr. Wilson chuckled at her enthusiasm, and Martha found herself smiling too. A genuine smile that reached her eyes and warmed something deep within her healing heart. The journey wasn't over. Real change never is, Martha was learning. It was ongoing work, sometimes difficult, often humbling. But as she watched Zora chattering animatedly with her grandfather, pointing out her favorite flavors, Martha felt something she hadn't expected to find when she first woke up in that hospital bed. Hope. Hope that people could change. Hope that bridges could be built across the divides of prejudice and pain. Hope that hearts, in all their forms, could heal and grow stronger than before.